All right, we are in page 5 of document 17, the counseling. So the purpose of this section here is to help us to reinforce the things we learned last term and earlier this term. On page 5, the counseling, as you get into a situation with people, realize that many people are helpless. Helplessness of many people. And, even over this past weekend, I encountered a few more of those. They may not realize there's a problem because they may realize that something isn't right. Many times people have this sort of undertow of feeling that something's not quite right, but they're not quite sure what it is. And so they get talking with you and they might find out, oh, well, here's an area of your life you're not really thinking about. And you remember Prochaska's model. We had to talk about that on our tests a little bit. And, this first stage is that there's this pre-contemplation that they don't realize that there's an issue. And then a contemplation where they say, oh, yeah, and things could be better. And so when you get into someone's life, you'll discover that many times they don't know there's a problem. And we're not trying to create problems where there are no problems. Obviously, we don't want to do that. But the things that they might think of as normal maybe not be godly. Okay? They may have grown up in a situation that's really, really unhealthy and unspiritual. And so even though those things may have come to seem normal to them and seem like home to them, maybe they're not. Okay, so we want to bring something to them that's going to bless them. They may not see a way out of the problem, so they've got a problem, but what are they going to do? And it may be depending on you and the blessing that God has given to you through the Holy Spirit and understanding Scripture, understanding people, that they may be able, because of your direction, to see a way out of the problem. They might not be able to find a way. They may not understand what caused the problem. They may not be able to trace this back to what was actually causing them. Maybe where the devil told them a lie. Maybe where there was something where they did something and somebody falsely accused them, or maybe they were told they're worthless and they just don't understand, what caused the problem. But you help them understand that, find out where they can regain some health, and their lives can change dramatically because you might be the agency by which God is bringing help to them. They may be helpless to find a way out by themselves. And you remember with the dog and y'all remember the learned helplessness thing? Okay, when the dog is on this grid, gets shocked. And how did the dog learn to get off of the grid after they took off the harness? Okay, they had to be helped off. This dog had to be helped so the dog knows that the dog is not helpless. And many times, unfortunately, people can be that way too. People can learn to be helpless. People can learn that you can't do schoolwork, for example. If they're mocked about their schoolwork way, way back when they're young, they might decide they just can't do it. They may decide they can't live a godly life because of the influence that's around them, maybe because of abuse. But you might be able to bring some direction into that life. They may be helpless to find a way out, but you might be able to show them and maybe lead them away from the sin. They may be in denial, refuse to recognize the problem. Not everybody wants to be helped. Some people sort of like their sin. They like the bad situations in which they find themselves. And they may be in denial about it also. They may refuse to recognize the problem, and it may take a while until they do. And they may never recognize the problem. They may live all their lives that way, but at least we can attempt to bring truth and guidance into their lives. Do not let them to dominate and constantly go over negative details of situations. So you get in a situation with people, and some people you can hardly get any data out of them, right? You ask and they give you one-word answers, and they're really a struggle to work with. But some people, you get them started talking and you can't get them to stop. And they ramble on with extraneous data that does not relate to the situation and to this bunny trail and that bunny trail. And sometimes you've got to say, slow down a little bit. Can you slow down just a little bit? And let's see, if you took us on a couple trails there, can we go back and finish one of them? So what we're trying to do is to, if they're completely closed, then try and draw them out. On the other hand, if they're like to smother you with words, see if you can slow them down a little bit, okay? They're constantly going over negative details, but never really quite getting to the problem, never ever wanting to deal quite with the problem. And so we try and find one of those areas and sort of see if we can get them to funnel their direction and their thoughts back into that to that area. Let's look at Proverbs 9:8, and not all people want to be healed. Not all people want to be helped. Unfortunately, and in the process of that, in Proverbs chapter 9, verse 8, we're told, reprove not a scorner lest he hate you. Rebuke a wise man and he will love you. So you get some people who are just determined not to pay attention to what you're bringing to them. And there gets to be a place where you just have to say, well, I guess if this person doesn't want to learn, we'll just have to find a way to excuse ourselves away from them. But we still want to bring truth to their lives because it may be a way of getting that contemplation into their mind, or at least they see there is another possibility. Some people's hurts are so deep, you try to work with them, talk with them, they just find it essentially impossible to respond. And so many people need an enormous amount of care, a lot of love, a lot of giving, a lot of acceptance. You want to talk quietly to these people. You don't want to be raising your voice to somebody who's dealing with that kind of difficulty in life. So they may not want to be healed, and yet there is still that longing that things could be better. On the surface, they're not going to want it. So we want to be open to them. We want to be able to bring God's word to them, bring our own love to them, connect with them, encourage them. Did we read books about those subjects? Okay. So we want to connect. We want to encourage. So many people have wrong perceptions of God. They think God is this tyrant. God is this person who's going to hit you on the head every time he has an opportunity. Many times this comes from parents. It can come from church situations. Hopefully not. But many times it does. Or people have wrong perceptions of God because maybe they've had so much abuse. People in their lives have maybe died, or their parents have left them or something of that sort. And so they tend to think of God as like that. And so we need to bring a biblical concept of God to that person. And many times we do that by bringing God through our own lives to them, as God's love flows through us to them, and we tell them the truth. Many times it will start building trust in their life. Because Jesus is truth, is that right? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, okay? So we bring those things to people, and truth is so important in bringing trust to people. If you have something wrong with your vehicle and you take it to a mechanic and the person makes it worse, what? Have they developed trust in you? Probably not very much, right? You're going to say, let's find another garage to take this, right? Because what they did was not truth. What they did caused more problems. So you want to be careful we don't cause more problems. The first rule in this is don't cause trouble. Okay? Doesn't mean we can't tell truth, help them understand, but we don't want to make a situation worse than it is. So when we tell people truth, it builds trust. You might not want to hear that your vehicle needs brakes all around, but if that's the truth and you get brakes on and your vehicle's safe, that will build trust between you and the person who did the repair. So we're building trust between ourselves and the people that God has sent into our lives. Be careful to understand boundaries. This subject will come up often in counseling. Why is that important? This person is not you, and you are not the person, and you're not God. I'm not God. So we have to make sure we accept and recognize the boundaries for ourselves, for the other individual, so that that person feels respected, feels honored. They don't feel imposed upon. We have to be careful about those boundaries. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. Informal counseling is frequently useful after a church service. Did you ever have this happen? After service, somebody wants to talk. Somebody calls you on the phone. A friend to friend. This can be very, very useful. One of the important parts of this is that you already have their trust. If it's your friend, you probably already have their trust. If it's me or somebody they've never seen, how do they build trust? Okay, it takes time to build trust. And so, it's very difficult for us to build trust with people they don't know us at all. If we can exude the love of God, trust will develop very quickly. On the other hand, if this is a person you've known for a while, you've learned you can trust them, they've come to you or you go to them. They know you care, they know you will take time. I hear constantly from people, this person had a struggle and somebody came, spent time with them, maybe drove miles, maybe sent flowers, maybe invited them over, maybe took time just to take them away for an evening. Okay, the value that places. So there's a lot of informal counseling, even at Bible school or church service or in the family, a lot of informal opportunities that just rise up and they'll just come into your life. Like, could happen today. Maybe it's already happened today. And so we want to be ready and willing to participate in those informal times. They can be the best times, really. Somebody's really hurting after a church service, come to your house. Can be a time when they're looking for someone to bring the love of God to their lives. What about formal counseling? By making an appointment. I usually say set flexible time parameters, somewhere between 1 and 2 hours. 1 hour can be a little bit short if it takes time for people to get into it. 2 hours, starting to get a little bit long, okay? Maybe an hour and a quarter, hour and a half, an hour and a quarter, then maybe another 15 minutes buffer before you've got to do something else. So I try to always make sure that I say, well, by 8:30, I've got to be someplace, and right now it's 8 o'clock. Or I'll probably tell them that at 7 o'clock, say at 8:30, I do need to be somewhere else. You don't want to wait till 8:25 and then say, I have to go right now. But what does that do to people? That's like pouring cold water on everybody, right? It just doesn't work. So we want to be straight up front, make sure they know what's happening, what to expect, and then put a little buffer time in there. Put a little bit of buffer time in there. So if you need to leave at 8:30, then maybe start winding things up at 10 after 8 or quarter after 8. Because usually we need a little bit of parting time. The person may think of something, oh, now there's something else they thought about. As you put that buffer in there and give that as their time, okay? They've given you their time, you've given them your time, but make sure when your time's used up that it becomes their time, okay? Sometimes if I'm in a church service speaking someplace and they'll say they give me 45 minutes, which happened last Saturday, I'll say, well, my time's up. You've given me this time to speak, but now I will give you my time if you want the time, okay? Now it's your decision. I'll stay here and answer questions, talk as long as you want to, but this time is at your discretion, okay? You've given me time. I've taken the time. Now it's your turn. So we want to set flexible time parameters, build in some margin so that people don't feel rushed. Begin and end with a sandwich approach, like talk about something a little cheerful when we start, okay? The weather or the snow or whatever, or, the grandchildren or whatever's happening in their life. And then when they leave, you want to kind of end with, many times it's a good idea to pray as the person's leaving. Okay, many times people come to talk with Lois and I. If it's somebody we know well, or if it's somebody, a young person who's come to us, we'll stand in our living room and we'll just, I might say, is it okay if we pray with you? And they usually say yes. I'll say, is it okay if we put a hand on your shoulder? And if they seem a little bit hesitant, boom, you don't push that. If they say, oh, yes, then Lois can put a hand on one shoulder and I can put a hand on the other shoulder, only with their permission, very carefully, okay? If there's any hesitance, no, but we will pray, okay? I'll be very careful with the boundaries. So I understand different people have different convictions about this and different people have different feelings about it. And I'm not telling you here exactly how to do things. You got to be sensitive to what God wants. But it's a good way to close a time together. And it's also a time, to bring God's power into the situation in a personal way. Also a way to, thank you for coming and it's been a nice evening. Thank you. Sorry for some of the difficulties, and we'll try and work through them. So we're trying to end things without sending the people at home crying into a handkerchief, right? Because that's not a good way, because that's what they'll remember, okay? That's what they'll remember as they're going home, and they won't ever want to come back again. Okay, you can break up a friendship this way. Prayer and speak hope. Again, at the end of the session, we start with hope. We want to end with hope. Hopefully there's some homework in between there. Build a bridge to them so they trust you and will open their heart to you. Affirm their value. Everybody has something good about them, right? So I get people to write, many times dealing with students, problems with parents, problems with church. I'll say, well, would you please make a list of all the good things about your parents, all the good things about your church? What are the things you really value? What are the things that you really find positive? So we want to affirm values, theirs and their situation. Honor them for who they are. If you know something about them, listen carefully, ask good questions. Do not allow them to say, I don't know. They'll say it a few times, but after a while, this becomes the answer to everything. And then you have to say, well, but what do you really think about this? Maybe you don't know for sure, but you said I don't know pretty many times now. So what do you know about it? You have some thoughts, you have some feelings. What are they? Could you share those with us? So I don't allow people to go into the I don't know mode very far. Okay. When they don't know, but many times they do have thoughts and feelings. Keep them on track. Try to guide the discussion. Don't be pushy about it. If they're overly emotional, you may need to say, your tears may not be useful right now. It seems like a very hard thing to say, but many times people will cry. We give them time to cry, not a problem. But if they get completely uncontrollable, then maybe sometimes if you just suggest to them that maybe, we did take a little time to cry, maybe if we can just talk a little bit now, many times they'll just stop crying, okay? And we're not trying to shut them down, not trying to make them feel badly, not trying to shut down the grief process, but at the same time, sometimes we just have to ask them not to continue in that indefinitely. Respect them. Men especially need respect, but you know what? As I read over my notes getting ready for class, men and women need respect. We think more in terms of men needing respect, but everybody needs respect. Everybody needs love and everybody needs respect. And I understand men tend to live more on respect and women tend to live more on love maybe. But men need love too. And women need respect too. Okay, so we want to think in terms of love and respect really for everyone. Respect them. Be careful what you say. Lois and I were just talking about a situation where there's a person we know who does some counseling and does some speaking and so on. And Lois and I got to meet this person one time. We had heard this person speak, but never ever got to talk to the person. And this person has quite a bit more formal training than I do, not quite as old as I am, but Lois thought I was rather abrupt with this person, okay? And I was a bit abrupt. I thought what this person was presenting wasn't quite right. And, had it been someone else with less training and experience and less ability to deal with life, I would not have been as abrupt. But I thought, well, this is one opportunity to work together. And I said some things that I tried to make this person think real hard, okay? And so there are times when you need to do that, but do it respectfully. Do it with absolute respect. Make notes. Tell them what you're doing. I'm almost always going to pull out a piece of paper and start taking notes because somebody's going to say, well, George said this and Mary said that and John did this and Sam did that. And after a while, I'm lost, right? I can't keep all these names in my mind. Okay, so Sam's your brother and George is your uncle, right? Okay. And John owns the store and Mary's his sister, right? So try and get this picture in my mind so that when you continue talking or whoever continues talking, that eventually I can say, okay, yeah, this person was the sister, this person owns the business. So keep a record on those kinds of things as long as if you're doing formal counseling, as long as there's something that's continuing, keep a record of those things. But when this is over, get rid of the stuff. I have found all kinds of things in files doing history and in education where people have kept notes that really should have been destroyed, things that I shouldn't even know about. So try not to keep things that are going to be destructive. Somebody brings situation, they have healing, and then you need to bring some closure to that and destroy those notes and make sure that you're not going to jeopardize their future Make sure that you're not going to, provided they're bringing healing into the situation, God's bringing healing to them. We don't want to allow somebody to just go on and cause damage everywhere else if we can prevent it. But at the same time, it's really, really important to me that those things are destroyed. Probably any of us have some things in our record that we'd just be just as happy if nobody knew about. You tell somebody something in confidence, they record it, and now it's in their files somewhere for their grandchildren to find. Not a good idea. Okay. So just some practical advice here. Hope, we want to speak encouragement to their lives, observe their cues, their posture, their tone of voice. If somebody comes in, sits down, crosses their ankles, crosses their arms, puts their head down, that's a very closed posture, right? There's a message there. They're telling you, stay away, stay back, or else I'm afraid. Or be very careful about trying to approach somebody like that until they're ready to relax just a little bit more. Their tone of voice, they might be angry, they might be whispering. Sometimes you can hardly make out what they're saying. Facial expressions, the way they look at you. Sometimes they'll look at you straight on. Sometimes they'll turn and look at the wall and kind of see you out of the peripheral vision. The way they're dressed. How are they dressed? Are they sitting in a casual, comfortable way? Are they dressed in a way to get attention? Are they dressed in a way that's really inappropriate? Are they dressed in a way that sends the message that, the leather jacket and the big belt with the big buckle and the cowboy boots, and you get some messages that come across pretty strongly with the way people are dressed. So clarify, use reflective language, use directive language. Do not force issues. If there's a sensitive subject comes up, drop it and put a little note on your paper. Oh, when we talk about the job, this person gets really defensive, okay? So get off of that subject, come back to it a little bit later and talk about it, 5 minutes later after they've had time to subconsciously process it. Maybe come back to it with different words. Respect their boundaries. Not going to go over boundaries again. We all know about that. But remember that you have boundaries and they have boundaries. Remember that? We both have boundaries. Make sure you're not inappropriately crossing boundaries. Don't want to do this. Very destructive, very harmful, very damaging. Just don't do that. If they cross your boundaries, does that give you a right to cross their boundaries? Nope. You've got to get this in your minds, folks. Just because somebody crosses your boundaries, and in my experience, they do. Somebody crosses my boundary, does that give me a right to cross their boundary? Does that give me a right to respond in kind? No, I don't have that right to do that. There's a weakness, there's a desire, there's a longing, there's a fear that's caused them to cross a boundary. Maybe they've crossed a boundary by talking unkindly to me. That's crossing a boundary. Maybe by dressing inappropriately. Does that give me a right to talk unkindly to them? No, it does not. So we want to be careful. You have boundaries, they have boundaries. Make sure the boundaries are intact. Okay, physical problems. Types of problems. Physical problems. If somebody having long-term issues, I usually suggest they get some kind of a physical checkup, a medical checkup, blood work. You're not doctors yet. Maybe you will be someday. But make sure there's not a physical problem. Make sure there's not some kind of a hormonal imbalance or some lack in their body. Because if that's true, you can counsel them the rest of your life and not remedy those kinds of things. Things like rest, sleep, too much, too little. I usually ask people, so how are you sleeping? You sleep pretty well? One of the trademarks of depression is people they just get so worn out because they're so depressed. They go to bed early and they just go crash and they're out. They sleep, they can hardly stay awake long enough to get to bed. Okay? And then they wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and they're wide awake because they've slept off all that pain and all that tiredness. But now the depression's back, okay? Whereas somebody with anxiety, or somebody's just like nervous about things all the time, will go to bed and they toss and turn until 2 o'clock. And then they're so worn out They just can't stay awake any longer because they burned all that energy, and the energy is eating them up. And then they go crashing off to sleep at 2 o'clock, right? And then in the morning, they can't get up. So many times these sleep problems will be telltale kind of about what's going on with the person's life. So what can they do? Well, sleep patterns indicate stress. And so these are kinds of things we ask questions about. And many times proper diet is not there. It's just amazing how many people are living on Oreos, as I like to say, or, fast food burgers and milkshakes. Yeah, we all like to do that sometimes, I guess, but eventually this will catch up to you. Another thing is exercise. Okay, let's talk about this one, then we'll take a break. All right, exercise. I had a good friend. He's no longer living, but he had all kinds of nervous problems, depression, anxiety. He just seemed to have everything. He's quite a bit older than I was. His family had a history of mental struggles. And he said he went to the doctor when he was a young man and said, "What can I do?" And the doctor said, "If you walk a mile every day, you'll probably be fine." Now, how complicated is that? He said, "I did that and I've been okay." But he couldn't forsake that, or he was right back into problems again. Many times people don't get enough exercise. And in our day and age, when we jump in the vehicle to go 300 feet, right? Instead of walking or riding our bike or something of that sort. And this is not a cure-all, but many times physical exercise changes people's lives. Okay, get in some kind of an exercise regimen. And I didn't say you have to join a gym somewhere. All you have to do is walk. In most cases, walking is very, very healthy. So we don't want to overlook some of the very obvious things. So I ask people questions. Are you getting enough exercise? Well, I don't. Okay, well, let's do that first before we decide that there's something seriously wrong with you, because maybe the exercise is the problem. You need it. God designed our bodies to work. Get these hearts and lungs working, get all the muscles working so that the rest of our body can function well. All right, on page 6, exercise. Please don't ignore this one. So many people I see get into sedentary lifestyles and start gaining weight and start getting unhealthier and so on and so on. So I realize that I need to think about this myself. Exercise can replace all kinds of counseling and drugs and that sort of thing. I'm not trying to say you don't need other things, but please make sure you get enough exercise. Structure is so important. If you have a job that brings structure into your life, that many jobs do, that's a good thing. Many people cannot structure their own life, so they need somebody else to structure it for them. You get a job that demands you've got to be there by 7 o'clock and you don't leave till 5. That's a structure, okay? And lunch is between 12 and 1 or something of that sort. Sometimes people go to the hospital, and the structure in the hospital actually brings more healing to them than they could have imagined, because in the hospital, the breakfast comes around at 7, and at lunch they bring you lunch, and you're not snacking on chocolates and chips all day because they don't have them there for you, right? And so, there's a structure that brings order to people's lives. That's something we have to think about in today's world because of all the homeschool. Some homeschools are not very structured. Some homeschools are a little too structured, and some of them have no structure whatever. But we do need structure, and within our lives, we need to make sure that there is structure there, whether it's imposed by ourselves or by someone else or by the environment. Dairy farmers, you've got to milk cows 8 days a week, right? And they got to get up, and every morning and every evening, got to milk the cows. So it seems that way, right? But it's a structure that brings order to life. Because if you don't do it, the cows are going to be mooing, and you're going to have to go out there and milk the cow. So many jobs can bring structure to life. Farming is a way to bring as much structure to life. We're not planting corn these days, not at least in Pennsylvania. Most of us aren't. After a while we want to, but that's a structure. And through the year, there's a harvest time. That brings structure to life. It also provides an opportunity for us to look ahead and say, oh, well, if I'm going to do this next year, I got to buy seeds, and I'm going to make sure that things are in order. And so many parts of our life historically were very structured. Today, many people are not very structured, and the lack of structure causes stress. So bring structure into your life, into other people's lives. Stressors of life, things like money, work, these things bring stress into life if we don't manage them well. Hygiene. Some people think we're too clean these days. We probably are. But we want to make sure that we're clean, make sure we know how to brush our teeth and all these kinds of things. I know it sounds silly, but there are people who don't do this. There are people whose bodies are not very clean. They don't take care of their bodies. They don't comb their hair very well. We can overdo it both ways. So let's be careful. Hygiene is important. And you get someone who's really struggling with this, you might have to have a little friendly chat with them and say, well, baths won't kill you. It'd be all right if you take a bath now and then. Might even make you feel better. So we have to think in terms of hygiene. Are their hands clean? Are their fingernails clean? Observe these kinds of things. Observe things about them and be gentle. Can be really sensitive, but be careful. Be careful, but you might need to bring some things like this to bear on their lives. Management. I don't know if that's on your notes or not there, but management should be part of that. Management, most of life is about management. Managing your money, managing your time, managing your energies. Some people just have no idea how to manage. It's time to make supper and the dinner dishes aren't washed yet. Well, this is a problem, right? After a while, the pile of dishes looks too big and then we can't manage that. And so then what do? I know there was a family we would go to visit sometimes when I was a boy, and my mother always hated to go there. Not that she didn't like the people, but this lady would have dirty dishes under the sink, And when she had ladies there for dinner on Sunday, you'd wash the dinner dishes and then she'd open the cupboard door and pull out dirty dishes from the week. And so my mother never looked forward to this a lot because this lady knew Sunday was coming and she had a way of getting the dishes washed. So this is not real good management. It's hard to believe that plain people in plain families would live this way. Maybe you haven't seen the whole world yet. And there are things going on that are kind of scary. So management's a huge part of life. And sometimes we just have to get into people's lives and help them understand, hey, here's how you need to manage this. Can you manage that? Do you realize, you probably cannot afford a 2-hour nap afternoon and still get your work done, and so on. Social problems, relationships. Relationships probably cause more problems than anything else. So we're trying to guide people into being healthy and strong themselves, bring boundaries into their life, okay? I just got an email that I need to respond to, and this person is clearly not using boundaries, no boundaries. So anybody can do anything. Well, is this the way a 25-year-old person should live? Well, maybe not. Maybe they need to bring some boundaries in there. So make sure in relationships people are being treated well. People are treating other people well. There's respect going on. Loneliness, many people are lonely. You know that? Even in a group, people are lonely. Especially men tend to be lonely. It's not only men, but many times encounter men who are just really, really lonely. Men get together and they sort of have these bombastic conversations, where they're talking about all the deer they shot and, how many, four-wheel drive pickups they've wrecked and all this kind of stuff. And, you get somebody who can't really enter the discussion. What are they supposed to talk about? So, you can feel lonely in those situations. Many times ladies feel lonely. It's a common problem. So help people understand, there are people to whom you can connect. Many times they're trying to connect with people who don't want to connect with them. Many times they're overlooking people who would be happy to connect with them. You get two lonely people together, and if they're kind and gentle and caring, it can be a really good experience. What I've discovered is that if I facilitate a relationship, if I facilitate a friendship between two people, they can help each other more than I can help them because they have time and they want to put time. I don't have 3 hours a day to do that, but they might, okay? And so get people together who can really bless each other, really learn, and at the same time, make sure that one of them isn't just pulling out of the other one all the time. So I see a situation like this, and after a while I'll talk with them and I'll say, so how's it going? Talk with one or the other, hopefully both individually, And I'll say, so do you both talk or does she do all the talking? Well, she does all the talking. Well, okay, one person is using the other person for a sounding board, and it's okay to do that for a bit, but you've got to make sure that it's a mutually beneficial relationship. So we try to walk people through those kinds of things. Loneliness is a terrible place to live, you know? You feel lonely, like you can feel lonely at church, you can feel lonely at work, you can feel lonely at school. And you know, you're never really alone because God loves you. But at the same time, you can feel very, very alone. Okay. Feel like you're just somebody nobody has time for. So try to bring healing to those people, try to bring some friendship to them, try and connect them with people. Try to make sure they know that you care. If they know that you care, you may be the person their mind goes to when they're lonely. And they'll know, oh, this girl cares about me. This young man cares about me. And that can give them security to live. Okay. They may need just knowing that you care. And at the same time, you have boundaries and you can't give them 2 hours every day, right? But you can give them some time so that they know, oh, yes, here's somebody I can always go to. And it's one of the reasons I like email, because it allows me to answer on my time. It allows them to answer on their time. I'm not very good at phone calls. I'm really not very good at phone calls. Phone calls interrupt me, they interrupt you, and there are times when they've got to be. But try to bring your presence in a good way, in a healthy way, into other people's lives. Expectations of self, of others, sometimes we just expect too much. We expect we should be able to do more than we're doing. Well, maybe we can. We expect too much of our spouse. We expect too much of our parents. Expect too much of the church. When expectations are low, satisfaction is high. Okay. When expectations are high, satisfaction tends to be low. So my parents got married and they were not Amish. They did not have a car. They did not have a refrigerator. They did not have central heat in the house. So the expectations, are pretty low. Okay. They had one pickup truck. They kept the milk and the butter cold in the milk tank, in the milk cooler where the milk cans were. They didn't have a milk tank as such, but a tank full of water. And that's the way they lived. So when expectations are low, satisfaction can be high, right? When we think we're going to move into a house that's got 3 bathrooms and a closet in every room for all of our stuff, and a garage with a 2-car garage, and that's how we're going to do when we get married, well, that could be a pretty high expectation, and maybe you can do that. Those expectations get so high, satisfaction gets very low. So think about the expectations. Well, what were you expecting out of life? What were you expecting from this job? What were you expecting from the church? What were you expecting in your marriage? Let's find out. Maybe they're unrealistic. Maybe they're not realistic about what they can do or other people can do for them. So some practical considerations: structure, make sure they're structuring their life. Planning, look ahead. Where does this go? If we make this decision, where will this take us? Can you think about spending and money? Many families get in serious trouble with money. I was visiting with some people some time ago, a couple of years ago, and well, did you ever get a letter in the mail, or your parents got a letter in the mail that said, "Dear sir, I am from some foreign country and I've inherited so many $1,000,000 and I think you could help me." And do you ever see these letters? They come on email too. I don't know what you think about those letters, but this man was worth several $1,000,000, and went to visit him, and he just pulls this letter. He said, "Look what I got. Look what I could get." I said, "Buddy, tear it in half and throw it away, or you're going to lose everything you do have." How could somebody who's able to build a business get snared and snarled into something like that? How could it possibly be true? It's true, and it's happening. If it wouldn't work, they'd quit sending out these letters. If it wouldn't work, they'd quit sending these emails. How can it possibly be true? We can get greedy. We can think, oh, more and more and more. And at the same time, make sure people aren't doing this. You get people constantly in a get-rich-quick scheme, right? They've found one more scheme. I remember talking to a man Well, he found a way to invest money in gold mines in Africa. Well, you know, I don't doubt that there are things like that, and maybe some people with the right abilities can do that. Certainly, I have no idea how to invest money in gold mines in Africa, but this man had already lost his farm because of some mismanagement, and now he was going to borrow some money to invest in this to get rich. So, in spite of the fact that you might see people and they dress like church people and they look like church people, and you wouldn't imagine they're doing things like this, it's happening. Okay, when you bump into it, you know, caution them, make sure they're understanding that this kind of thing is going to cause them a lot of trouble. Many people don't realize that, let's see, what did he say? I can't be out of money. I still have checks left, right? Or something like that. So as long as they've got a couple pieces of plastic in their purse or their pocket, you know, they're good to go. It's amazing how much of this kind of thing happens. Even in our circles, I hear time and time again, somebody, you know, they're older than I am and they're still in debt because of mismanagement. Okay. And I don't mean just a little bit of debt, but I mean a lot of debt. And so you want to help people manage. There are people, especially within the Anabaptist community, who are really good at handling money. And some churches are actually assigning deacons or good businessmen to work with families who struggle. Are you aware of this? Not too much? Well, it is happening, okay? I remember a family I was working with, and they just could not manage their money. The father was a good man, worked hard, knew what he was doing, skilled man, never had any money. Couldn't pay their bills. Finally, the church sent two men out and said, "We're going to take your checkbook, and we're going to take your income. So when you get money, you bring it to us. We'll manage." And in less than a year, they had them above the water again. Okay. But as I was talking with this man sometime later, I said, "How much spending money do they give you?" He said, "Well, not very much." You know, so you know his ice cream cone money was in his wallet. You know, available all the time. But somebody else managed his money, and there was plenty. It was not a problem. Okay, but when he was managing his money, there wasn't enough. And so it's amazing how many times money management is a problem. And there are people out there who can help you, who want to help you, who will help you. So try and get those things together. Schedules, once again, it's more like structure. And, you know, can you build all these things into your life? Time usage, wasting time, or being a workaholic, working all the time. I know a man who was, once again, from a plain church, and he fell over and they thought he had a heart attack. They rushed him to the emergency room, and they said this man just suffered from total exhaustion. He was a farmer, and he worked like the only time he slept is when he couldn't work anymore. Then he'd sleep a little bit and get up and work. You know, you can be a workaholic. You can drive yourself until there's nothing left to you, which is what he was doing. Personal discipline with your mind, with your body, with your spirit. You know, are you a disciplined person with your eating habits, with exercise? You know, personal discipline is what life is about. And sometimes we have to encourage people to make sure they're using those disciplines. Media usage becoming a serious problem. People living in a virtual reality, novels, magazines, media of all sorts, movies, internet, games, daydreams, all kinds of issues because of media. The internet is wasting people's time. Do you ever kind of get on there and just hard to get off? People can't, oh, there's so many interesting things, so many exciting things, and on and on and on. People literally get addicted. There is now an internet addiction, okay? Just because, and it doesn't even have to be bad things, it can be good things. Many times it does turn into bad things, and that becomes a serious problem. But we have to, it's a question we have to ask in working with people today. What are you doing with media? Where are you with that sort of thing? Just over the weekend, I bumped into someone, and he said he just loves the news. But then with the news, there's always things there, you know, look a little dangerous. Well, yeah, why are you in love with the news? Why? I like to know what's going on. I like to know what's going on with the news too. But can you not click on the things that are going to take you in the wrong direction? So when you think about those kinds of things, over on page 7, no concept of margin. Build extra time and money in decisions and plans. Suppose you say you're going to start farming and you've got all kinds of big ideas. So you buy some land and you rent some land, and you figure you can raise 200 bushels of corn, and corn's going to be worth $8 a bushel. And this is how you budget your next couple of years, right? Is that guaranteed? That's not guaranteed, you know? You better start budgeting. Maybe you'll get 100 bushels an acre, and maybe it'll be worth $3.50 a bushel. Okay, budget on that and buy that kind of a tractor. And then if it's $4.50 a bushel, you'll be so delighted, right? And if you get 130 bushels the acre, you'll be delighted. When we put together a plan that has no margin and has the wrong kind of margin, like we're going to make a lot more than we ever could possibly imagine, no, this will just get you in serious trouble. Okay, no margin means constant stress, constant pressure. Get yourself behind, and how we ever get out of this. So people need to build margin. They don't understand that. You might have to help them build some margin. Do you know what I mean by margin? A little extra space. If you think you're going to milk cows and you're going to be getting $30 100 for your milk, well, that would be really nice. You know, maybe budgeting for $16 a 100. Maybe that would be better than if it's 18 or 20. That'll be good. Okay. So always build some margin into what you're doing. Make a simple plan for correction of practical problems. Create a journal, income and expense. Very simple to do. All you need is a notebook. 1 page income, 1 page expense. When Lois and I got married, we just got two manila envelopes. We had one for unpaid bills. We had one for paid bills. That's really complicated, isn't it? Right? A bill comes in the mail, you drop it in the unpaid bill folder, right? When you pay it, you put it in the paid bill folder, and you get to the end of the year, you do your taxes, you get out the paid bill folder, write them up, and you're good to go. But, you know, there are people even in our circles who never balance their checkbooks. They're calling the bank to say, could you tell me how much is in my checking account? Well, there was a time when banks would put up with that, but banks don't like to do that anymore, okay? Now, with the online banking, you can do some of that thing maybe, but some people never balance their checkbook. They don't know where they are. They don't know if they paid the bills or not. You look in their pickup truck, and their bills scattered around on the seat and on the floor, right? Some of you may have seen some of this, okay? And then they wonder, where's this and where's that? And they can't find it. And after a while, something catches up to them. So sometimes it's just a matter of buying somebody one of those expandable cardboard folders that you can probably buy at the hardware store or the drugstore, and start labeling those pockets. Okay, I know this sounds silly, but trust me, it's got to be done. Make a schedule, rising times, mealtime, bedtime. Make a schedule of responsibilities for everybody involved. Build a little margin into the schedule. We had a schedule hanging inside the cupboard doors in our kitchen for our children. Just made a matrix: feed the dog, take out the trash, set the table, put everybody's name across there. So on Tuesday, you feed the dog. Saturday, she feeds the dog, and so on. So simple. There's not a problem. All you do is open up the cupboard, and if your name's there, you do it, okay? And it's not complicated. So life is so easy in some ways, but if we're not going to do these things, I find life can be very difficult. Go slowly, be gentle. Some people need time to develop discipline. If you are a very disciplined person and you get somebody who's not disciplined, you can cause them an enormous amount of stress by your discipline. Everybody has a threshold of this. I know I try to be careful as a farmer, but I've talked to some farmers who wear me out. They want to know exactly how many of each trace, what trace minerals are in on my reports from the soil test. I can't remember all those things. And these guys have this stuff memorized, right? You walk into their barn, they know each cow and the sire and the dam for back 3 generations, and how many pounds per lactation. And it's okay. It's okay. But if you have that level of discipline and you try and impose that on somebody who doesn't, give them a little time. You can wear them out, okay? It can be a little bit too much. It can be true in business too, or in any other area of life. Go slowly, be gentle. Some people fear success. We've talked about this before. Success creates a need for responsibility. Some people don't want the responsibility. You can get a husband and wife. The wife is so concerned because they're not paying the bills, and the husband doesn't know what he's done with the money. And in some cases, it's because he does not want responsibility. So if he doesn't have money, he doesn't have to be responsible for how you spend it. Seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? You know what counterintuitive means? Intuitive means this would be the natural, normal way of thinking about something. Counterintuitive would mean the opposite. How could you ever think that not having something would give you a break? Well, it's convoluted thinking that is trying to help people prevent the need for responsibility just by not having something. Like they would never want a new car, never want a new tractor, because, well, what if they scratch it, okay? Or what if they bump it, okay? And it's okay if that's their style. But if it's to avoid responsibility, if it's to avoid caring for it, then it's going to be a different kind of a problem. Too much discipline may initially cause stress. What you want to do, start with one area of life, later move into other areas. You know, Lois and I kind of had a wake-up call on this. Our first baby passed away, and we were eager for children. And so we took in 2 foster children. And they came to us with like a one shopping bag, half full was all the clothing between the 2 of them. And she was 5 and he was 8 years old. Okay, brother and sister. That's all they owned was like a half a bag full. And then because they were with a state agency, we had to take them in for evaluations and so on. And I remember the psychologist looking at Lois and I and said, you know, you look kind of Pennsylvania Dutch. She said, do you realize that your level of intensity could be causing a lot of stress for these children? That was a wake-up call for us because I had never thought about that. That when we do things, we have disciplined life. You know, we eat breakfast on time and lunch on time, and we sit down to a meal, and these children would say, is this the first dinner or is this the second breakfast? They didn't even know the names of the meals, okay? At 8, they didn't know the names of the meals. And we had a storm and the electric went off, and he came out. You didn't pay the bill, did you? You know, I mean, he was so familiar with this is the way you live. As soon as the electric is off, somebody didn't pay the bill, right? He knew about that at 8 years of age, right? Very worldly wise. And one day he accused me of setting a booby trap for him. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, you come with me. And we went up in the barn and he opened the door to the forebay, you know, where it goes down to the barnyard. He said, I put that door there so he'd open it and fall out, you know. He didn't know anything about a barn and a forebay and what you might use that for. And so, you know, these people were like, at that young age, they were so already conditioned by their environment that the discipline that we have just of eating meals on time was too much. So gently, slowly. I mean, before we go to the store, I'd see them have their heads together and they were plotting what they were going to steal. Okay? And so I could tell more stories, as you can tell. But think of the little bit of discipline that you have experienced probably, and somebody like that does not. You try to bring them into that situation that quickly. In time, it was a real blessing. You know, we had them for maybe a year and a half. I can't remember till the parents got them back again, wanted them back. And it was hard to see them go, you know, after you invest and you bring that discipline into their lives. But every time they went back for a visit and they came back to our house, well, Dad's going to get us a pony and new bicycles and all this kind of thing. Well, you knew it wasn't going to happen, right? So then it would take a couple of days to get back into this. But just think in terms of a very disciplined environment and then somebody bringing into that, coming into that, which is not very disciplined, it's going to be a lot of struggle. So be careful we don't impose too much too fast. Discipline will eventually produce security. If you follow it faithfully, if you instruct the people, eventually it'll produce a great deal of security. Identify problems brought on by personal habits and behavior patterns, sin. A lot of sin going on, immorality, too much work. You know, what is happening in this person's life? Be careful. Coping mechanisms. People get deceived into thinking that this mechanism is going to help them. A lot of deception out there. People think, well, if I do it this way, it's going to work. Maybe not. Identify problems brought on by behaviors of other people. Hypocrisy of parents or authority figures. I spent time talking about this at the conference on Saturday. Are you, as leaders, being absolutely people of absolute integrity? If you're not, your people are going to struggle. Okay. So, hypocrisy of parents, hypocrisy of authority figures, abuses. People have been abused in any different way. People have been invalidated. In other words, they were never thought of as valuable. They were never thought of as important. These are problems brought on by behaviors of other people in their lives. They're ignored. They're rejected. Maybe, you can get some, maybe there's a time to talk about a lost child. In our family, we had 2 handicapped children and a child born between them. So what do you think happened? Those children needed our attention, and the child born in between them, perfectly normal, learned easily, easy to be ignored. So, we then sometimes think of that child as a lost child. They're lost because they grow up, they're healthy, they're very helpful, they're kind, they're helping to take care of their siblings maybe, and there they are, and they don't get attention because they don't need it as badly as somebody else. Okay? Or maybe parents are so occupied with something over here and something over there, that child just becomes lost. And those people are difficult to deal with because they feel rejected, they feel neglected, or they feel like somebody else took their place. They feel like somebody else got all the attention. And when you're 3 years old, you can't figure it out that your sibling is handicapped. It doesn't make any sense to you because that's all you've ever known. And so it's important, you get to a person like that, but it doesn't have to be handicapped. It can be almost anything that takes the parents' energies away to somebody else instead of to them. And so lack of feeling loved, we have to make sure that we're able to bring love and care into those people's lives. Many times you'll get a spouse like that because maybe they were a person like that. Maybe then they got married and they thought, now I have somebody who will love me, no question, forever. And all of a sudden it doesn't work. And so we have to work with the people trying to help them see each other as they really are so that the love and care can come to them. We need balance in life. The Bible says, Romans 11, behold both the goodness and the severity of God. Romans 11:22. Behold both the goodness and the severity of God. You have some churches, some families, some people. God is always good. If you look at some of the social media, you get people put posts on there, and it's always wonderful, right? I mean, how many people have Jeremiah 29:11 as their verse? Don't put up your hand. Okay, I understand. That's a great verse, and it's true, but it's not the whole picture. Okay, read the rest of Jeremiah 29. Read the rest of Jeremiah, especially those chapters 26, 28, 30, and on. You'll discover that God has plans for people who don't do right also. Okay, and so we want to make sure that we're living a life of balance, that we're not just choosing one side or the other side. Proverbs 3, once again, let not mercy and truth forsake you. Proverbs 101, verse 1, I will sing of mercy and judgment. Mercy and judgment, those two things go together. All right, emotional problems can be, but are not necessarily brought on by spiritual problems. Not all problems are spiritual, so do not try to solve all problems as if they're spiritual in nature. For example, if a godly wife, if a godly wife is abused by an ungodly husband, will she have emotional problems? She will. She's going to come with emotional problems. Does that mean she has a spiritual problem? No, it doesn't. But so many times, because we are people who tend to think of things in spiritual terms, we're going to say she's got a spiritual problem. She's not being submissive. She's not in the Word. She's not praying enough, and so on. Many times we're on the wrong track, okay? If a godly wife is abused by an ungodly husband, she will have emotional problems. This does not mean she personally has a spiritual problem. And if we don't get in there and honestly assess the situation and bring some healing to his life and her life, this emotional problem will become a spiritual problem, okay? Because in time, she might get bitter against the church. bitter against you, bitter against the leaders, because you didn't do anything about it. And initially, what she had was an emotional problem, which has now become a spiritual problem. Okay? Does this make sense to you? Please pay attention to this, because I see it happen way too many times. And because we're church people, we tend to see everything in spiritual light. And indeed we should, but we also have to discern if something is emotional in nature, whether it's between parents and children, husband and wife, people in the church. Spiritual problems can become emotional problems, can become physical problems. So a husband with a spiritual problem creates an emotional problem in his wife and children, and then this can become physical problems because somebody's going to get depression, somebody is going to have an ulcer, maybe somebody's going to get migraines, and all of a sudden we got problems and we don't even know where to start. So Christian people tend to see all problems as spiritual, but emotional problems can become spiritual problems if the result and response is anger and or bitterness.